Welcome back to another episode of the Arbitrage.Run show. I'm Donkey Teeth, joined by Kevin from Arbitrage Racing. Kevin, what's happening, man? Congrats on the huge 10,000 win milestone.
Appreciate that. Yeah, long time coming. It's been a target, I think, really ever since we hit like 1K. I was like, well, 10K would be cool. So the day has finally come. Only took a year and a half, blood, sweat, and tears. But yeah, really excited.
It's big. It's big, and a lot of congratulations out there on Twitter. It's good to see the community acknowledging your accomplishments because I know it wasn't easy. It took a lot of time and dedication and a robotic entry of races.
Yeah, embarrassingly large amount of time to get there.
Right. It's one of those things that it's like, should I be proud or
don't show the fiance, please.
So we are going to be giving away a horse to commemorate and celebrate this huge achievement by you. And at some point in this show, we will let you know what horse that is and how you can sign up for that raffle. We will also be doing our standard roll of the wheel for which horse we're going to be putting into lending, and we'll be announcing when that horse will be going into lending this week. So stay tuned for that a little bit later in the show. But Kevin, let's get to, we're going to start off a little bit different this week. Let's talk about keeping it real off of the top. This was a big lucky maiden week. We had stockpiled a lot of good breeds for this, as we do every cycle. And I think we entered about 25 horses into the lucky maiden this go around. And it wasn't great. It was not great. We got to keep it real here. We did this last lucky maiden a month ago and kind of ran through how it all shook out, what our hit rate was, and all of that, just to be transparent on this. And it wasn't that great last cycle, but I'd say a little bit worse this cycle. We entered 25-ish. I don't know the exact number, but it was right around there. And we figure we got maybe 4 C1 free racers, no real killers out of the batch, right?
Yeah, I think O-Head's probably the best one. The O'Neill third head kid, which breeding those two, I think we paid, I don't know, what was it, 2.5 or something for that, off was it Bad Boy Racing these days, and Crimson. So when you pay that much, you hope to get a C1 runner, and it looks good, not like some of what we've seen from third head, but a good low dollar C1 runner at the mid level.
Yeah, that was O'Neill in third head, and we'd been holding that one. And then Grandeur Boom was probably the second best, which it kept us engaged for a while, thinking that it had upside, and then it ended up losing some somewhat disappointing flames in class 1. But it should be a good free one marathoner, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Another one. It'll be fun to breed, and with the right streak in a tournament, it can do some damage.
But yeah, O-Head was a little better. Then we had a couple other nice ones. We had a handful. I mean, our standards are quite high. I mean, there's some solid horses. We're gonna put a lot of them into their own segmented grand finals in the Lucky Maiden this time, so they got a chance to return at least their breed fee like immediately, which is the great thing about the Lucky Maiden for those that are not familiar with it or playing in it yet. We've been talking about it for a couple weeks, so definitely prepare for it next cycle, because especially the Buterin one, you can enter really cheap. That this is a tiered entry system, so they're lower entry fees for those lower bloodlines, and you can qualify. It's kind of a crapshoot on getting into that Buterin grand final, and you can make some real money immediately, right?
Yeah, exactly. Get it back quick, and it's so much fun watching that production LJ puts on every month, and just having some skin in the game is a good time to spend. A good way to spend a Friday night, at least in my book.
The zombie leaderboard is cool to follow along with too. So we had like 6 to 8 we kind of tallied. Other good racers, not great. They might be able to qualify in class 1 occasionally, but they're probably should be in class 2, right?
Yeah, they're that type where you kind of need the right tournament to surface where they're racing against peers to really do well. And then with the lucky streak, they can be okay. But it's kind of one of those, I guess 7 or 8 of those are at the mercy of Zed's scheduling for now.
Right. And then so that leaves, if we say that we entered 25 and we've come to maybe 12 or so here, that leaves about half of them that are varying degrees of glue. Not going to say they're worthless. A few of them are definitely worthless, but yeah, there's hope for some of them depending on, what the class system looks like. There's definitely some sort of breeding value at some level. You're not going to be investing in top tier studs for a lot of the females there, and the males, I don't know. But yeah, that's again 50% type hit rate. And then if we're looking at like actual success, we're talking about maybe 10%, 10 to 15%. But no killers. I mean, we would like to see like a 5% hit rate on our best breeds of like knocking out something that can compete in class one paid, but that's just unrealistic for even our stable right now, right?
Yeah, and the bar keeps going up until they fix this class system where you're just gonna have the bar, yeah, keeps getting harder and harder. So naturally, the hit rate is gonna keep going down until they figure out a place for all these horses to run.
Right. This is a good segue because I tweeted about this like that first night that I guess for us in the US it was Sunday night after the maiden started. And I think that it's probably most difficult like right away because everyone's excited to get their best breeds out there on the track. But those discovery races seemed exceptionally difficult to me relative to a month ago and especially like 2 months ago. So it does seem like they're getting stiffer and stiffer. I guess I'm curious on your take on what that means. Is that just a reflection of people breeding more strategically, better breeding, and not being as loose with their choices?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people are getting smarter every cycle, and you're kind of throwing some of the worst performers out, so it's naturally gonna increase. I don't know if it's necessarily like power creep or whatever people call it, but it definitely feels real that it's more difficult. And then yeah, you kind of alluded to it, but a little bit of alpha is on maiden days. If you're on the fence of whether a horse is going to qualify, wait until that next day, at least in the US, because they are much easier. It'll take a little longer to qualify, but your odds of qualifying for a maiden and getting off to a good start is a lot easier when you don't have those beasts running around.
Right. Oh, I should say we didn't humble brag here, but we did get two into the Lucky Maiden Grand Final again. So we got a couple bullets. It's how do you think that they are going to stack up in that field of 12, or Ohead and Grand Draboom?
I think Grander Boom will flame in all of the marathons. I think Ohead actually is probably the one I would pick of the two to win it all. Just because if you ever get a mid into the grand final, that thing has a potential to flame. I would guess at 5 of the whatever distances they run. I think at least 4. I would be surprised if it's under 4. So anytime you're flaming at a higher percentage, you should have a pretty good shot. But the trick is to be that good, you typically need some kind of variance. And it's hard to get into that grand final with that kind of variance because you just have to have so many podiums to get there. So had a little bit of luck in qualifying there, but I expect big things out of Ohead. And then I think Grant, the other one could do well in the marathons. And if we get a reverse roll in a sprint, like Metatron did a few cycles back, but a reverse roll in the marathon funnel, it could happen. We'll see. We definitely have a chance.
Yeah, it's always fun when you get something in there, even if it's just in like a Finney funnel or something like that. Just having something in the grand final is a blast
Yeah,
that night.
there's the earth color ones this time too, and I noticed just we had one that I didn't even realize was an earth coat, and I went to that leaderboard and found that we were qualifying one for that. So there's just so many categories that are a lot of fun to track.
So I definitely props to Lucky Jack on that. And there's like a cross and pacer one, which is not that difficult if you breed strategically for that to qualify for. So we'll have, I think, probably two in that grand final. But yeah, I guess a little bit more alpha for our listeners. We'll give it up here. Like the Saba one I saw early, like there was disproportionate amount of entries in the Sabo one this time. So it was really easy to qualify for that grand final and give yourself a shot at some quick returns. I'm sure now that we're talking about it, it won't be so easy next cycle, but take a look at how many horses are signing up for each bloodline when you're deciding if like fringe horses are worth entering into it.
Yeah, that's the other cool thing, right? You can enter anytime over the 4-day span. Just because you missed the ZED Maiden on Monday doesn't mean you're out of it for the LJ. As long as they're unraced, you could sign up. Like we signed up a Zabo last night, and we're just going to run the 20 races over 24 hours and just take a few fatigued. But the bar was that low where we're probably going to qualify that horse.
Yeah, that was. I stayed up late getting those races in, and we ended up getting a little help from a friend over in Australia. To
Right.
Shout out to Jamie from LJT Racing. Appreciate the help there. But yeah, back to the original conversation here. It is getting tougher, and I don't want to take credit. Somebody made a joke that it's because of this new site called Arbitrage.Run getting all these good bloodlines out there, but I think it is. To a certain degree, a reflection of large stables pumping this good blood the last few cycles into the ecosystem, smaller stables maybe being able to snipe some of those using Studmaster. And then, as we alluded to weeks ago, once you have that blood, you can strategically breed it out at a lower cost if you have males and females in your own stable. And that was kind of our goal in opening Arbitrage.Run. Again, I'm sure we had some degree to do with it, sharing some of these higher end breeds, but other people are doing that too. So that parity is good for the game, and love to see it kind of working out that way, even though it does make it tougher on everybody, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the more you can spread the wealth and have more people winning, it's better for the game.
For sure. Anything else that you want to say on this topic of the fields getting tougher here in the maidens?
No, I'm good.
All right. So we did have one successful breed, since we just did keeping it real, that we wanted to talk about, that we did enter into the Lucky Maiden, and I will pull it up here. It was a Buterin, and we actually did this breed twice. Let me share my screen.
Question is, was the first one better than the second? Was there decay?
Yes, is there pairing decay going on here? So this was this cycle's Proud Malawi, and they're both coming from Roid Rager's Proud Delight offspring, officially Proud, and our exclusive Buterin mare, Malawi Brilliance. So this was the one that we entered in this Lucky Maiden. We got a pretty cheap stud fee considering this blood, but this was a 1.0 offspring, so sometimes people get a little bit deterred by that. So it's coming from Roid Rager's officially Extraordinary and Proud Delight. So the first time, I thought that maybe we had just pulled some Proud Delight genes and got lucky, but now we've hit it twice with this one. This is the second one, right, Kevin? It's got the distance preference here. It's going to qualify number 5 in the Buterin funnel in the Lucky Maiden. It's like number 59 overall. It looks like a nice horse. And then here is the first one, which is Malawi Proud. Very creative names here, right?
Makes it so hard to remember which is which.
So this was the first one. 51 races, 37% win rate. Some of these are conditionals for sure. What's your take here, Kevin?
The first looks better, so it'll be a point to those who are on the tinfoil hat with the pairing decay. But they both look good. They look similar, and some of those stats are padded by having the conditionals that match. So the second breed may end up looking somewhat like that, as it's just been going through the general racing population right now. But it's held up nicely. Look forward to the Buterin only grand final.
Yeah, remember this was going against those tougher fields too, so it's hard to really give a fair comparison until we see them go against each other, kind of in those conditionals that you're talking about. But it was good to see a repeat, and this. I'm curious your take on this, Kevin. Do you think that there is something to these pairings, like our Triumph for Molly and Blue Bullet pairing, that has hit now 3 of 5 times, and really 4 of 5 are decent, and then we got this one essentially hitting twice. I mean, this is an awesome outcome for any Buterin breed, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think there's something to like finding a pairing that meshes? What do you think goes on when you find something consistent like this? And of course, a sample of 2 isn't necessarily meaningful.
Yeah.
But
I mean, what's what we have though, right? Now I think there's something to it. I don't know if it's necessarily like those horses just like mesh really well and they have good chemistry. I think it's probably more so something going on with breeding 2.0 where this archetype of a horse matches well with a horse that has maybe a little more variance or something. And I'd hope as we get more and more data, you see like the pairings that match from an archetype perspective. Like we've seen at the Z1 level, right? Figured it out, and Grandeur produced some of the best Z2s out there. But now we see, I think Grandeur had a good offspring with Rendezvous recently. So it's not necessarily it was just figured it out. It was kind of finding that type of horse that supplements what Grandeur does very well and produces a good roll as on top of that. So I don't think there's a ton to it, but I think there's something to matching a type of horse that breeds well with it.
Yeah, well, for science, Roid Rager, if you're listening, we'd love to do this pairing again just to see if it can go 3 for 3 in consistency and build a little larger sample. So hit us up or let us know if he's going to go into stud, and we'll snag one with the same pairing. But I think this is a good segue. We intended to do the spin here, but while we're on this topic, let's just dive into our first Twitter question, because I mean, it is all about these archetypes, and it's coming from Zombie Racing. His question is, in breeding 1.0, it was considered favorable to breed a legendary female horse with a Genesis sire over a well-bred legendary sire. In breeding 2.0, assuming equal breed cost and race ability, would you pick a Genesis over a well-bred 2.0 legendary sire? So, Kevin, you want to take the first crack here?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I think it's still too early to really tell, but my preference would be look at the legendary. If they're truly as good on the track as the Genesis and the same price and everything else the same, I would probably look at their parents from those two Genesis and see how they compare to the other Genesis in question. And if they are better than the other Genesis, then I would go with the legendary, because you always have that potential role of getting the grandparents. So you kind of have two shots there of pulling from a horse that's better than the Genesis you're contemplating. And then if it hits the legendary role, well, you're going to have a horse that's comparable at least. And then on top of that, in the current system, it does kind of pay to have a horse that's lower down the line, right? When we have these exclusive only tournaments, if you can have a horse that's C1 free good, they're going to play better in the exclusive only tournament than a legendary only tournament, right? So all else equal, I think I would choose the 2.0 legendary, assuming it came from parents that were comparable or better than itself.
Yeah, I think that answer makes sense. Let me put you on the spot here, though, because either way, it's going to kick out an exclusive. So I don't think that becomes a factor. If you're breeding a legendary female into a Genesis Z1 or a legendary Z2, you're going to get an exclusive Z3 or Z4. And let's say the Z1, that stud that you're looking at, is maybe it's the same horse as, let's just say they all have relatively identical traits. The Z1 that you're looking at, the Z2 legendary you're looking at, and the two Z1 parents that are the parents of that Z2 legendary that you're looking at. I guess my opinion is then it's doesn't matter, right? I guess maybe you want to keep the Z number lower for some reason, speculative reason down the line, but now right now that doesn't really matter either. So it's really pick your poison, right? It's all the same because we're just looking at the traits at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one possible case would be if there's something breeding talent wise, like you could look and see which has produced historically better offspring. So I would dig in a little bit on that side. And then if you find that the legendary has done it, well, legendaries have finite supplies of offspring they can produce, whereas the Genesis is going to be cranking it out every single month. So for that reason, I would probably still lean towards the legendary, just to kind of try to get it while it still can breed, and then hope that the Genesis pops up in the future because it's always going to be breeding.
Yeah, there's almost an argument for legendary stud fees being greater than Genesis if they're the same traits, just because they're finite.
Yep, absolutely.
So another part of my answer here, Kevin, is I think that this ultimately becomes so back to 1.0, right? The reason that breeding with a Z1 was almost always preferred to breeding with a Z2 legendary was because base ability dropped off. Base ability was all that mattered. in that first breeding algorithm that we're familiar with pre-update. And then everything else was randomized. So all you could control was finding the two, I don't want to say highest base abilities, because it seemed that if you had two with too high of base ability, that you would just end up with an A shaper. So it's finding that highest base ability stud and pairing something that is not quite as high base ability with it. So that's why, to me, it made so much sense in 1.0. Now, like you're saying, it's sometimes better case by case, right? The same conditional answer and relative answer that I like to give and probably infuriates people, but it really depends on each individual horse. It's hard to give a blanket answer here, but to me, the true value to Genesis studs is going to come with the class update. I think they're going to do something. The Facundo has said that they're going to give Genesis preferential treatment in every facet of the game that they develop. And I think if you're looking at the way the game is structured out, because they're not going to necessarily change a lot of the bones of the game. We've got these different genotypes, genotype, what do we call it? Breed types, Genesis, Legendary, Exclusive, all the way down the line. It stands to reason, we've already got this built into the game, where you breed an exclusive female with a Genesis, you hold that exclusive line, there's going to be value in that. These are professional game designers. They already have these things. They see those angles. So the real value in a Genesis stud, to me, is going to come as they build this game out, as they build the new class system out, as they build progression out, holding that exclusive line. We don't have that value right now, but speculatively, you may want to prepare in advance and hold that exclusive line, knowing that theoretically, maybe those exclusives can progress better. So I think that's my takeaway on why you might choose a Genesis now over a Legendary. But if you're breeding a Legendary with it, you're going to get exclusive either way. So it more comes down the line at exclusive or even the elite level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good way to kind of swerve, because the current meta is, like what I was saying, just go as low down the line as you can, because you're going to have easier competition. But yeah, if we get more benefits in the future by being closer to Genesis, then that's a good pivot where you could kind of zig while others zag.
Yeah, and I've said that to you when we've been debating breeds, because there is that natural pull, especially a couple of weeks ago when we had all these conditionals for elites and crosses and pacers to keep breeding down the line. But then in the back of my mind, I'm sitting here thinking the game's going to change in a month or two, and there are probably going to be advantages to having these higher up breed levels. So we shouldn't just totally ignore that and continue to breed down into monster crosses. It's always kind of a balance, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, our strategy is kind of just have exposure in both, but it's an interesting one, because I think we kind of disagree on this, where I would say I'd rather have the best cross in the game, who might be comparable to the 20th best Legendary, but I would take the best in any kind of funnel, because if the game works out as it should, you're going to have like horses racing like horses, and maybe the pots are smaller, but there's something to having like the best in your group, So that's my take on it. But yeah, people can debate it. I think it's a really good subject to talk about.
Yeah, and when people there's so much talk about scaling back breeding and it being pointless to breed right now because it's a losing bet. I mean, my counter to that is everything that we just said. Like, the more that we're able to prepare in advance, and of course we know there's going to be 50% miss rate, right? And that's a sunk cost. So you have to know that going in, but the more that we can prepare in each area, we're kind of hedging ourselves for this class update. And so we want to continue to breed out, especially our upper bloodlines, but even some of the other good blood. Like, we can find in-house options, and other people can do this too, or they can come to us for a cheap, well-blooded Buterin stud for $20 or something like that. We'll throw them into stud. So can keep breeding them out. I say, not financial advice, but you're preparing yourself for all of these different future segmentations and hedging against what ZED ultimately ends up doing with this future class system, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I wish they would do, and they haven't, maybe that's intentional, is just like the breeding minimums feel like they should be adjusted and be a little more dynamic. Like there's just so many Nakamotos who go untouched because it's that 0.08 or whatever 0.0783 that is just untouched because it's too steep for the return in the current environment. But I know it's a can of worms because how do you price it? Do you do it dynamically? But I don't know. It just feels like the floor should be much lower to just give a chance at some of these horses getting picked up. I understand they want it to be like exclusive and like Nakamoto's just cost more to build, but it disqualifies so many horses from ever being viable to be bred. So just my soapbox on that.
Yeah, I definitely wish that it was pegged to the US dollar.
Gotta be dollar. Yeah.
So I think that that's a factor. Lower, maybe a little, especially now. So, I mean, I know people make the argument for having no minimums, which in the past would have been somewhat disastrous because it just wrecks the market, right? So anybody that bred in the past had to live by these minimums and pay this amount at minimum to create these offspring. So they've invested at that level, and now you take it away, and suddenly you and I could go in and throw in a horse at virtually zero and breed horses for free. That's not really fair. Studmaster has helped with that, right? But it's not foolproof because then we can manipulate that and keep things below 15% and still breed for free a lot of bloodlines, right? So I think there is a need for some sort of minimum. Maybe having it dynamic could work, but then you get that question of how do you do that, right? And that's the same as the class system, right? There's no easy answer, but I'm with you that it is probably a bridge that needs to be crossed at some point.
Yeah, it just makes it the whole being pegged to Ethereum makes zero sense. Like everything you win in the game is dollar based, so it needs to be pegged to the dollar. And then the ETH number is going to change. And you can still pay an ETH, but there's no reason it's indexed to the 0.08 when 0.08 could be a really good deal. Like if Ethereum goes way down, or 0.08 could be, I don't know, $300 if it's back to like all-time highs. So it's just makes no sense to me.
Right. Well, it adds to the complexity of the game that Facundo kind of alluded to trying to take out, because it compounds the difficulty of this market. And when you have people value, there's some people that value things 1 ETH equals 1 ETH because that they're crypto people and that's where they came from. So they're valuing their horses in ETH and it doesn't matter where the price goes. There's some people that are valuing in US dollar. And then so you've got those two dynamics going against each other, and it creates a major market inefficiency that, of course, newer people aren't going to pick up on that as quickly as people that have been around. So disadvantage number one for new users. And then you've got this stud farm that's pricing in Ethereum, but you're winning prizes in USD. So you've got this other calculation to go in there, and it just makes everything more complicated and tougher for new users, right?
Yeah, the 1 ETH equals 1 ETH. I don't really get it. I guess I kind of get it if you're valuing your asset as like an NFT, but if it's a yield-based asset, which ZED primarily is, your yield is in dollar. Everything you get is indexed to dollar. So it's not 1 ETH equals 1 ETH when it comes to ZED.
Well, if you're going to have ETH regardless, and you were never considering liquidating it into US dollars, and you put this ETH into another crypto asset like a digital horse, well, you're looking at it as ETH because you would either own that ETH or you would own the digital horse. So the dollar then doesn't come into that calculation because you were never really considered dollars anyway, because that was your ETH exposure, right?
Right. That's where I'm saying, like, if it's an NFT, then that's fine. But you play ZED, and at this point, the primary driver to play is to get return, right? And it's all coming to you in dollar. Like, we do better when ETH is down because $1 equals more ETH. So that's actually a good time to farm Ethereum. But anyways, we're way off track. Get back to the Twitter questions.
It's complicated. This is the short answer here. Yes, other question that kind of ties into Zombie's question here. This is coming from Dan, who actually works at ZED. And this is our first question from a ZED employee. And he says his best horse is a high variance mid, which makes him angry. However, he wants to breed it. Do we have any tips to make the best horse in the game? I mean, we're not going to share the tips to create the best horse in the game because we want to do that and keep it secret. But no, we don't know. We don't know how to do that. Do you have any tips for him as far as breeding this high variance mid? You want me to go first here, Kevin?
Yeah, you take it.
So it really ties back into Zombie's question here, that it's all about the traits. So in what I learned from breeding 1.0, and I still believe this, is that each horse kind of had a cap on the traits that they could have. If you think of, I always kind of allude to it like in, if you ever played Madden and you're creating a character, you could give your quarterback like this level of arm strength, like maybe 80 arm strength and 70 speed and 60 awareness, and you could fiddle those numbers around on this scale of 100, but you only got a max number of attributes to spread around. So I think that that's the way the game worked, and that's the way breeding 1.0 worked. So Genesis horses, for instance, if they have really high base ability, they're not going to have a lot of variance, and they're not going to have a lot of distance preference. And so those three traits were on a scale. So if you look at a horse that has very high variance, it probably didn't have that high of base ability. And you see that as it's a mid, it didn't have high distance preference. So I think our breeding theory here, Kevin, is to find the optimal mix of traits when you're pairing two horses up together. So if you know you've got a high variance mid, well, what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to stack distance preference on it, so eventually you can have a sprint line or a marathon line? If so, obviously you're choosing that. But the key is to bring some base ability into it, because if you just take two high variance horses together, yeah, you're going to get some variance, but the horse is going to have really low base ability, and you're probably not going to pass down the highest degree of variance from both of those. There's going to be a lot lost in there, and you're just going to end up with glue. So you want to say, I've got the variance here, I'm going to bring base ability in here, and then probably just stick it at mid and try to breed for that mid funnel versus slowly trying to stack down the line in distance preference. So that's kind of my answer. You know, you've got the variance there. There's no need to bring high variance from both sides unless you know that you've got like a high variance, high base ability, which is very rare in my opinion. So I'm looking at bringing base ability more in as a pair for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. The only thing I would echo once again is I wouldn't try to turn a mid into one of the specialists on distance preference. I would stick to something that is around a 1600, 1800 type horse. And then, yeah, like you said, you don't want two vanilla beans breeding with each other. You might hit it big, but that's going to be a total lotto chance on the variance. So I would look at something that has high base ability and maybe a touch of variance, probably in the lower Z's, and try to just get the best of both worlds, get that base ability, get that variance, and just stick it at mid.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it's a good follow-up question here. We've talked about this before, because a mid essentially, in my opinion, has no distance preference. If you want to, I think it's really difficult to take a true mid and go marathon, because it's so competitive up there, and that spectrum is so wide from 1600 up to 2600. So why not go in the sprint direction and take your, high variance 1600 female and breed it with a strong distance preference horse? Is it because it doesn't have high base ability, likely because of how those traits mix together, or why are you anti going in that direction with a mid?
I think you're sacrificing something else, kind of what you were saying, where the pie is only so big, and if you have one that's super sprinter, they're going to be sacrificing base ability, and then you're going to be left with this horse that has okay variance, okay distance preference, okay base ability, and in this environment, that can be disguised as glue.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, there's something in the back of my mind with all of these discussions is what that future class system that is coming very soon is going to look like, and how it all plays into that, which that's all speculative and we can't say for sure, but
yeah,
something to think about. So that was there was a critique that we got from last week, which I pulled in here. If people don't like our show, we do want to know. We're open to constructive criticism here. So our guy Sovereign Stables wants us to put more question answering in here and less wheel spinning. So I think you and I are on the same page here. We would love to answer more in-depth questions and analytical questions if that's what the people want. And that's why we post every week on Twitter before the shows from the Arbitrage.Run Twitter account, which if you're not following, follow, 4 questions. And if people like the questions, we're going to answer them. So if you have specific questions, please give them to us. We want to give you guys what you want out of the show. We want to give the content that you want, that you find helpful and useful. So please give us those questions. But otherwise, we're just shooting and shooting from the hip and talking shit up here and guessing at what you want, which these were the two most liked questions. We're going to address them. If you have other specific ones, please give them to us. But we also want to bring some entertainment into the show, so it's not just all dry statistics. And from our point of view, the game is not necessarily super complicated. So you've kind of shared pretty much everything you know already. Maybe people need to hear it several times in different ways or something for it to connect. But you've pretty much shared all of your knowledge as far as the racing goes and what you do and how you operate, right?
Yeah, most of the stuff we talk about now is kind of circumstantial, more specific questions, but the principles are basically the same. And I mean, we've nerded out pretty hard the first 30 minutes of this show, so hopefully Sovereign's happy about that. But the other good thing about YouTube is you can fast forward, you can rewind. So if you see a big wheel pop up, just skip the segment and move on to something a little deeper.
Speaking of a wheel,
let's go to the
wheel. You know what? I need to pull up the wheel here, and we're gonna do the spin. All right, spin the wheel, Kevin. We've got 4 horses. We're gonna put one of these into the lending barn. When are you gonna put it into the lending barn this week?
So we've got the pity point tomorrow. These aren't really pity point horses, so there's no point in having in there. Let's do tomorrow night at 10 o'clock Eastern. So tomorrow night being Friday, September 23rd.
Friday, September 23rd, 2023. If you're listening to 2022, if you're listening to this in 2023, the horse is not coming in there. So look for it on Friday night U.S. time. Let's spin the wheel here. We got 4 horses. Ruling Legend, who is a Z1 mid. The Publisher, another Z1 mid. And then we got 2 marathoners here, Triumph for Hours and Volatile Artist. Which one of these do you want, Kevin, if you are in the lending barn clicking around?
Oh, man. Triumph for Hours followed by Volatile Artist. The marathoners that compete are just so hard to come by.
All right, let's do it. Volatile.
What is this wheel?
How did that keep going? All right, Volatile Artist going into the lending barn tomorrow, Friday, September 23rd, 2022. At what time did you say?
10 o'clock Eastern PM.
All right, and we've got another giveaway that we're going to do here, and that is going to be a horse that's coming from Altered State Machine. So this is in commemoration of Kevin's 10,000 wins in ZED. So we're going to give away this nice Z6 Nakamoto exclusive filly. The parents are Simple Cadence and Altered State Machine. Pretty fun bloodline here, Kevin. So Altered State Machine is coming from Ruling Legend, who almost landed on that spin wheel, and Proud Delight. 2 really nice mids here. Again, you got Proud Delight with that ridiculous variance. Ruling Legend has some. It passed down pretty well into Altered State Machine. Pretty nice horse here.
Yeah, Altered State's a fun one. One that we kind of gave up a little early, and then we revisited it, and it's been very solid, which is what you would expect from those parents. So yeah, a lot of ways this horse could be quite good. The Z6.
You know, Altered State Machine has been bringing some profits, and I threw this one into the lending barn a couple weeks ago, and it keeps getting borrowed out, and it looks like people are doing pretty well here because I don't think this was us.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, that's true. Arbitrage.Run was us.
And then on the other side, we've got Simple Cadence, and Simple Cadence is coming from Perfect Cadence. Most people know that horse. That's a monster. And Plain Host. So this one is not a bad horse either. Neither of these are killers, but there's ridiculous lineages, and they're solid horses. So I have pretty high hopes for this horse that we're about to raffle off. Hopefully we can get a good one into some people's hands here, huh?
Yeah, I agree. And being a filly always helps. You can kind of be strategic in how you breed it out depending on what it looks like. So I always prefer a filly over a colt if I'm trying to start a bloodline.
Right. So for this one, let's say if you're still listening to the end of the show here, put a comment in the YouTube show, this episode, and put your wallet address. And to be safe, put your contact information, either your Discord or your Twitter, and we will raffle it off to somebody that puts a comment in there. We'll probably raffle it off on maybe this coming Monday, which will be like September 26th, just to give people a chance to watch and put their info in the comments. If you're watching after the 26th, don't worry about putting a comment in there to enter the raffle, because it's probably already been raffled off. And we will reach out to you and try to make contact before we do send it off. So put your contact information in there. That all sound good, Kevin?
Yeah, sounds good. Excited to see what it looks like on the track.
Me too. All right. Well, this is a good spot to wrap it up. We've got some football tonight. We got to go get that Rainmakers lineup in and win some money.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Follow Kevin out on Twitter at Arbitrage Racing. I am at ZED Diamond Hands. Follow our Arbitrage.Run account. It's at Arbitrage.Run. Check us out on Arbitrage.Run to book a stud, book a mare, contract us for a custom breed. We're going to have a lending page. It should be up, I think, this coming week, where you can start to put requests in to borrow one of our horses once direct lending comes. And you can put in your request for what the terms are for our consideration. So we want to start lining some of that stuff up, so we have plans in place for when direct lending launches, and we're not just dealing with all kinds of requests coming in at once. And then historical pricing is coming. It almost came for today. We were going to talk about it on the show. There was one last hiccup with that page launching, but that will be up for next week. I promise this time. And let's wrap it up there, Kevin. Have a great week, man.
Thanks. You too. See ya.